Hello everybody and welcome back to another EP video. Senate Democrats need all 50 members of their caucus to come together to pass bills that do not have any GOP support. So, in theory at least, any senator could constantly force the party to bend to their will. In reality though, only Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia is using that power. He has already blocked President Biden's nominee to run the White House Office of Management and Budget, and he forced congressional Democrats to make changes to the economic stimulus bill before he provided his needed yes vote. Manchin is also opposing proposals embraced by the Biden administration and most congressional Democrats to raise the federal minimum wage to $15 per hour and to mandate background checks for nearly all gun sales. Perhaps most important, Manchin and Senator Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona are the two Senate Democrats most strongly opposed to changing the chamber's filibuster rules. That opposition is becoming increasingly controversial within the Democratic Party as Republicans in states such as Georgia enact laws that will make it harder for left-leaning people to vote and have their ballots counted. Simply put, Democrats will not be able to pass laws pushing back on these GOP provisions without changes to the filibuster rules. So the question remains, why is Manchin the only senator really using that leverage, and thereby impeding the goals of many in his own party? It's pretty simple actually. He is the only one who can use that leverage and who wants to. He can because no Democratic senator is less bound to the party than the senior senator from West Virginia. And he wants to because he seems to have different goals and political values than many others in the party. Furthermore, because voters increasingly back the same party in congressional and presidential races, only 6 of the 100 currently serving senators are from a different party than the one their state backed in the 2020 presidential election. But even among that group, Manchin still stands apart. Hillary Clinton was completely trounced by Donald Trump in West Virginia in 2016, 42 percentage points, and Joe Biden in 2020, 39 points. But in 2018, Manchin won in West Virginia by 3 points, despite an aggressive GOP effort to defeat him. In fact, considering the extreme GOP lean in West Virginia, Manchin's 2012 and 2018 victories are two of the most impressive wins of any American politician in the 21st century. So you may be asking, how does he do it? He votes with Republicans more than most of his Democratic colleagues do, but so did former Senators Joe Donnelly of Indiana and Heidi Heitkamp of North Dakota. And they were blown out in 2018, even as they ran in states that are a little less GOP leaning than West Virginia. It is true that Manchin is a well-known figure in West Virginia because he was once a governor, but Democrats have run former or sitting governors in other red states, such as Tennessee's Phil Bredesen in 2018 and Montana's Steve Bullock in 2020. And they haven't done nearly as well as Manchin, who is also not uniquely charming or charismatic either. However he is doing it though, Manchin's winning in a very red states gives him incredible power. He is a lifelong Democrat and seems committed to the party, but he doesn't really owe Biden, his fellow Senate Democrats, or the formal Democratic Party much of anything. His political brand is essentially separate from theirs. So ultimately, Democrats don't have much, if any, leverage over the West Virginia senator. Prominent Democrats are surely aware that Manchin could switch parties and join the GOP, and that might actually help his political career. So they can't really attack him too harshly when he takes more conservative stands. Also, there is virtually no chance that a Democrat to the left of Manchin could win a general election in West Virginia. So Democrats also can't really keep Manchin in line with the threat of a primary challenge either. Indeed, the lack of a credible primary threat makes Manchin freer to go against his own party than Trump-skeptical Republican Senators Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, Mitt Romney, and Ben Sasse were able to when Trump was president. All 4 of those senators represent states where a Republican to the right of them could win a general election. Similarly, Kyrsten Sinema in Arizona has also cultivated a brand independent of the Democratic Party, but probably can't veer too far to the right in a state where both Biden and Democratic Senate candidate Mark Kelly won last year. So that all explains why Manchin can screw Biden and other Democrats without fear of electoral repercussions. But it does not necessarily explain why he is doing so. You might say, well, obviously he's doing it in the interest of being reelected. but it's certainly not clear that Manchin's behavior is totally or even mostly electorally driven. First of all, it is not at all certain that Manchin will run again. He'll be 74 in August, so if he seeks another term in 2024, he would essentially be planning to remain in the Senate until he is 83. That being said, old age is not the only reason Manchin might retire. He may be extremely successful at electoral politics, but Manchin is not immune to the broader political environment. One where, as we mentioned, the majority of people in red states such as West Virginia increasingly vote only for Republican candidates. Manchin was first elected to the Senate in a special election in 2010, winning the race by 10 points. Then, 2 years later, he won re-election by 24 points. But in 2018, he won by only 3 points, and it's extremely likely that Manchin would have lost his Senate race had it taken place in either 2016 or 2020, since a presidential election would have drawn out more solidly Republican voters than a midterm. And as I said, Manchin's next race is in 2024, which is, of course, a presidential election year, so he could very well be an underdog. And even if Manchin is running and thinks he can win, it's not totally clear that his moves right now to limit Biden's agenda are that electorally helpful. Manchin no doubt benefits electorally from keeping some distance from the Democratic Party. But at the same time, will West Virginia swing voters in 2024 remember and appreciate that Manchin would not go along with aspects of Biden's agenda? The answer is probably not. In fact, on the most high-profile issues, the stimulus package and Trump's impeachments, Manchin ended up voting with the Democrats. So, if it's not all about electoral politics, what else is driving Manchin to break with Democrats? Well, the West Virginia senator seems to sincerely disagree with the dominant view among Democrats that the GOP is totally unwilling to work with Democrats when a Democratic president is in office. Manchin has repeatedly argued that there is real potential for bills pushed by Biden and Democrats to get support from at least a few GOP lawmakers if Democrats really try to work with the GOP. And therefore, he is balking at changing the filibuster rules, in part because he thinks that bipartisanship is possible, but neither party is trying hard enough. That being said, though, the evidence does show that the overwhelming majority of Republicans on Capitol Hill are not going to support any major policy initiatives backed by a Democratic president. So at the end of the day, Manchin's view of his GOP colleagues seems somewhat inconsistent with reality, but his optimism about the potential for bipartisanship makes sense from his perspective. After all, Manchin is friendly with a lot of Republicans on Capitol Hill. Manchin and a bipartisan group of lawmakers were key figures in passing a COVID-19 relief bill in December. That was, of course, when Trump was still in office. Second of all, Manchin may not see the contentious issues of the day, specifically the filibuster and voting rights, in the extremely high-stakes, democracy-in-peril way that Democrats do. West Virginia is not Georgia, which has a Republican coalition dominated by white people trying desperately to hold on to power by any means necessary against a growing Democratic coalition in which people of color are the majority. West Virginia's non-Hispanic white population is 92%, much higher than the nation overall, 60%. Now, I am not suggesting that Manchin does not care about African American voting rights, but he certainly does not have a huge black constituency pressing him on this issue, as only 4% of West Virginians identify as African American compared with 13% in the nation overall. Third, it's entirely possible that Manchin really cares about voting rights but thinks that getting rid of the filibuster and passing election reform legislation on party line votes is bad electorally for the Democratic Party, not just for him, and worse than Democrats trying to win elections even after some of these GOP-backed laws are in place. Manchin, as I noted earlier, seems deeply committed to the Democratic Party, but he might disagree with the dominant electoral thinking in the party. After all, emphasizing bipartisanship is Manchin's strategy, and he is the one winning in a super Republican state. Now, lastly, Manchin seems to be ideologically to the right of most congressional Democrats, electoral considerations aside. In a Democratic Party that is increasingly organized around pushing for economic and racial equality, Manchin and the party's more liberal members are essentially from different planets. Ultimately, he is much more of an old-style politician. He grew up in a small coal mining town in West Virginia where his father and grandfather had both been mayor. And in 1982, at age 35, he was elected to the West Virginia House of Delegates and climbed the ladder from there, state senator, secretary of state, governor, and then U.S. senator. Put all of that together, and the Democratic Party's fate is in the hands of a man who does not owe the party anything, cannot support some of their agenda for electoral reasons, and probably just disagrees with some of that agenda anyway. Much of the Democratic Party believes that the biggest problem in politics is that the GOP is becoming anti-democratic, and that this anti-democratic shift is an emergency for the country. But Manchin sees the Republican Party as including people that he can work with, and seems to think that the biggest problem in politics is that elected officials on both sides are not being bipartisan enough. This difference in views between Manchin and much of the rest of the party may be incompatible, and if they are not restored, Manchin's view will ultimately win out, because he has been a deciding vote and seems very much willing to use it. That is all for today's video. I hope you all enjoyed. Please make sure to follow EP Official on all social media shown on screen and linked in the description down below. Also, make sure to like the video if you did down below, and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you all so much for watching. Check out more content from my channel here, and as always, tune in next time. EP out.